From the Weather NorCal Command Center, this is your morning update.
At Ceramic Designs, we don't just sell tile. We help you create spaces that feel like home. From classic to modern, we carry hundreds of options for countertops, floors, walls, kitchens, and baths. Our team of design and installation experts will help you every step of the way. Are you ready to start your project? Visit us online or stop by our showroom here in Redding. Ceramic Designs by Ron Green.
Well, good morning, everyone. Well, Milt sent in this photo, and in his description he said, "You tell me." This is what's known as a sundog. It's actually fairly common, and typically what you see there are the clouds. Those are some high, thin, cirrus clouds. They're ice crystals. So when the sun shines through them at the perfect angle, you can get that rainbow effect. And a lot of times these sundogs, you'll see it on either side of the sun, and then sometimes even a full circle around the sun with those cirrus clouds. I want to thank Milt for sending in this photo. You can do the same. Milt sent that photo from the free Weather NorCal app. And if you're lucky, you just might see it right here in the morning update and live on Coffee with Krueger at 6:30. All right, so here's what we've got here with you. Take a look at Krueger's Quick Cast for your Thursday, July 2nd. Starting off with your skeeter meter on a scale of 0 to 5. It's at a 2.4. There you can see some of the advice that the Shasta Mosquito and Vector Control has for you to help keep your backyard and your property in general from becoming a breeding ground for those skeeters. You can always call the Vector Control at any time if you have any issues with mosquitoes or standing water around your area that you're concerned about. All right, here's what we have out the door this morning. Mainly sunny skies, maybe some fog for parts of you along the coast, but otherwise some clearing through the afternoon for you. We do have some clouds up to our north. That's associated with an area of low pressure and cooler air, and that's what's keeping our temperatures at bay. But that soon may change. In fact, will change as we go into the weekend and even as early as tomorrow. Take a look at Futurecast. Any fog that we do have along the coast, it's going to have a hard time burning off in some areas, especially around the Humboldt Bay. Otherwise, you've got those afternoon clouds developing for some of the higher elevations. At this point, looking fairly dry. If you're heading out to the pool this afternoon, do note you're going to need that sunscreen. You're going to need to do what you can to protect yourself from the sun, but you certainly will stay cool by that pool side or in the pool in particular. But temperatures should be in the mid-90s. Of course, don't forget about Mindy's safety tip of the week. If you got a pool party or a bunch of kids swimming around the pool, assign an adult, what's known as a water watcher, someone who is dedicated to watch the water with no distractions and to make sure they don't get distracted themselves. Change that position every 15 minutes. Thanks to Mindy Odell for that safety tip of the week. Temperatures are going to be in the low to mid 80s for some of the higher elevations, although some of the warmer spots like Trinity County, inland areas in the low 90s, low to mid 60s for the coast. And for tonight, mid 60s for the valley, 40s and 50s for the higher elevations, and around 50 out along the coast. All right, let's take a look at that 7-day outlook. We'll actually see a spike in the temperatures over the next couple of days. And the peak of that spike, wouldn't you know, is going to be on the 4th of July and then kind of hovering around the mid to upper 90s, even around 100 degrees through most of next week. The coast actually cooling down a little bit by the weekend, upper 50s, especially by next week. But pretty much anywhere else you go outside of the coast, you've got that spike on the 4th of July, and then it's kind of hovering around, right around or just above normal, taking you through next week. Now, we don't have any major wind events, although the winds are expected to pick up a little bit by the time we get into the second half of the weekend in particular. But the fire weather risk and the humidity, those are a couple of things that we're tracking here. So as of right now, we're mainly within that moderate risk, nothing unusual, nothing terribly concerning. You'll notice it gets a little bit within that elevated range with some of that orange in there on Friday. But another thing you'll notice as the temperature increases, the winds pick up a little bit from the south and the humidity is rather low. We're going to be more within that high range with that area of orange. That'll probably continue into Sunday as well. So with the temperature is increasing and the humidity dropping, that's going to really elevate that fire weather risk. So highs near normal for the rest of the week. Spike in the temperatures of 4th of July weekend, and especially for the 4th of July. Next week, highs will be just right around or slightly above normal for this time of the year, and I'm watching the potential for a bigger heat wave as we get towards the middle of the month. Of course, we'll have more on that in our deeper dive forecast, which we're about to get into here for your Thursday, July 2nd. So here you have it. We take a look at the satellite image, and a couple of things to take note. Number one is you'll see that these clouds right here, we still have storms that are kind of riding up to our north, generally pushing through the extreme northern portions of the Pacific Northwest and Canada. We have high pressure over the desert Southwest that's trying to build in. So as these two kind of battle out, the cooler and hot air kind of battle it out, it keeps our temperatures at bay. That is, yes, it's warm, but it certainly would be a lot warmer if this cooler air wasn't here suppressing that heat. But here's the overall trend that we're seeing across the nation. And this is something I've been talking a little bit about, but you've probably been seeing it on social media and on the headlines in the news, at least national news. Big heat wave for our neighbors off over the eastern United States. That ridge of high pressure is right here. There's another big ridge of high pressure way off further west over the Pacific Ocean. But for us, between those two, we typically have what's called a trough of low pressure. That trough, see how we have this ridge, we talk about that arc and the dome of high pressure, right? Well, we don't have that. What we've got is a trough of low pressure that allows cooler air to filter down. Now, the thing is, this time of the year, by the time that colder air over Canada works its way down towards us, it moderates a lot, and especially with the heat over the desert Southwest. So instead of 110 degrees, it's more like mid to upper 90s for the valley. So we'll certainly take that. So let's zoom it in tighter here, take a look at the overall trend. You'll notice we no longer really have that trough as we go into the weekend. Here's the 4th of July. Ridge over the desert Southwest gets a little bit stronger. That heat extends and expands into Northern California, and we see those warmer temperatures as a result. But we continue to see these storm systems ride to our north. We see a little bit of a trough of low pressure, but for the most part, we have a fairly flat jet stream. It's called a zonal flow type pattern, and it's up to the north here. To the south of it is where you have the warmest air, and to the north of it, the cooler air. Now, typically in the winter, this jet stream is farther to the south, and that's why we see those cooler temperatures, and where you see that zonal flow type pattern is where you typically have the rain as well. So that's typically aimed over us as well. But overall, you can see just this big area of heat, right? You've got a big ridge here, which is still in place. You've got one that's building down to our south and west as we get towards the latter part of next week. Now, as we get into the latter part of next week, we're going to continue to watch this trend, because if we were to extend this beyond next Thursday, it's going to take this heat, these two will kind of join forces, and we'll have high pressure really build and work its way into the desert Southwest, awfully close to us as well. It's extending closer and closer to Northern California, and this could mean some bigger heat heading our way, possibly toward the middle of the month. No guarantees at this point, but when we look at the long range here, at least July 8th through the 12th, we're still within that near normal to just slightly above normal for this time of the year, as predicted by the Climate Prediction Center. So the 10-day trend, nothing unusual, folks. The blue line here is where our normal temperature is. So by next week, we'll probably be looking at that normal temperature around 98. Well, when you look at next week, we'll just be a little bit above that at points. But we start off below it, actually, for Monday, Tuesday, slightly above that. You know, instead of 98, more like 102. Again, just, 4 degrees above normal. That's not too bad. And then, of course, we see it kind of drop back down a little bit here. So overall, you see no major spikes. Yes, 102 is warmer than what we're going to see today, but it's not a huge increase, right? So we just see these little minor dips and peaks as we take a look at that overall trend. So kind of interesting as we take a look at that overall. All right, so let's take a look at Futurecast, because things get a little interesting as we go into the weekend. Let's talk about that. All right, so first of all, today, you'll notice the afternoon clouds. It's picking up on a little bit of rain, maybe some drizzle out towards the parts of the coast, but still fairly dry. Friday, we're looking at probably a potential for some more afternoon clouds in the mountains, as you can see right here, but sunny skies in the valley. And look at that marine layer kind of holding on a little bit here for the coast for your Friday. Now, Saturday, things get a little bit more interesting. Look at the clouds right here. We actually have high pressure over the desert Southwest. The flow around that high, we're on the very outer fringes of that flow, and that monsoon moisture is actually working its way up. Monsoon moisture is a warm, kind of subtropical air that you typically see in the desert Southwest, and they see those afternoon thunderstorms typically as a result. sometimes that monsoon moisture works its way up here into Northern California, depending on what kind of pattern we have. And this type of pattern has high pressure. The flow around that high is transporting that monsoon moisture in extreme eastern portions of Northern California. So this would include places like eastern Lassen and eastern Modoc counties. So this is Sunday, and we may have enough instability where we could see some thunderstorms popping up Sunday afternoon in extreme Modoc County. I don't have it in the forecast just yet because it's just kind of one of those borderline where that rain and thunderstorms will begin to develop. But it is something worth watching. You'll also notice that marine layer along the coast still on Sunday, and even some of that monsoon moisture in the form of just some high and mid-level clouds for even parts of the valley. And then by Sunday night, we lose that daytime heating. Typically with the monsoon moisture, it's the afternoon heating that really helps to squeeze out any of that moisture. All right, so here's what we got with your lake levels. Still over 100%. I mean, it's kind of when do we transition, especially for Shasta Lake, below 100%? We'll see, but certainly getting closer to that. But the good news is we're still over 100%. All right, from the historical average, that is. All right, you can see the wave heights are actually dropping through the day today. They're going to drop even more for your Friday. So that hazardous seas warning that we've had will be allowed to expire later this morning. Otherwise, take a look at your marine forecast. North winds at about 15 to 20 knots. As I mentioned, no advisories after that, after those winds start to die down a bit. All right, here's a look at your neighborhood forecast sponsored by Dignity Health and Grange Co-op. Starting off with Trinity County. Temperatures 80s and 90s here. There's the peak, right, around Saturday. I do expect a few more clouds coming in on Sunday, Monday. Temperatures dropping a little bit as a result. Take a look at the North Coast. Actually seeing cooler temperatures by the weekend, especially for the second half of the weekend, with highs there eventually down into the upper 50s for your daytime highs. But it is warming up for the inland areas. 95 for Saturday, Sunday inland, back down to around the upper 80s to about 90 as we go through at least the first half of next week. Siskiyou County, looking at temperatures in the mid 80s, although a little bit cooler. Some of those higher elevations around 80 for places like Tennant. Out towards Modoc County, low to mid 80s for your highs today. Back up at the low 90s by the weekend. And right around 90 for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Again, keep in mind, Sunday's the day that we can attract that potential for thunderstorms. And that would include places, east of the Warner Mountains is where it looks like most of that would be. So Cedarville, for example, might, but maybe not Alturas. All right, we take it to the eastern mountains, places like Doyle, Janesville, maybe Susanville, and then, of course, to the north of east of that, Eagleville, for example, may see a thunderstorm on Sunday. But otherwise, looking at dry conditions. For the valley, not much change, really keeping it in the low 90s for the south end of the valley. We take you out to Chico where it warms up to about 98 for the 4th of July and then back down to the low to mid 90s for Sunday through Wednesday of next week. We take you up north, 95 for Redding, 94 for Red Bluff, 95 out in Palisadro. Could get up to about 100 degrees for Red Bluff on Saturday, and for Redding, a high of about 102 degrees for the 4th of July. Temperatures start to drop a bit, but generally in the mid to upper 90s for Sunday through Wednesday of next week, kind of getting close to, if not hovering right around that 100-degree point. That is your morning update. I'll be back again at noon for the latest Check Your Weather. Have a great morning.
Trying to avoid mosquito danger? The following tips are a game changer. Dump out all standing water, dress in long sleeves and pants, avoid activities at dusk and dawn, and defend yourself by using an EPA-approved insect repellent. For more info, go to shastamosquito.org.